Ann, welcome. I am so excited to have this conversation with you today.
Oh my gosh, Lynn, I am delighted to be here. So thank you so much for having me.
Your work has really shaped how an entire generation of marketers think about storytelling and really the humanity in marketing, and the idea that good content isn't just informative, it's meaningful. So that feels to me honestly so important right now because we are in this moment where AI can generate almost infinite content. But audiences can be a little skeptical about that. And as brands are producing more and more content than ever before across more and more channels, it's really about creating content that matters. So you want to create content that matters, that people can trust, that people actually connect with. So I'd like to explore a few things from a lot of what you had talked about in your keynotes and in your writing is creating content that actually matters. So let's start with the big shift that everyone's feeling right now. And we have to start with the conversation around AI because it's changed for what feels like for us in content and marketing like a long time ago, but in the grand scheme of things, it's really been almost overnight. And you've said things that really have stuck with me about AI can generate content, but it can't generate meaning. So I'm really curious to kick things off of how you would say the definition of good content has changed.
Yeah, so maybe the best way to answer that is just to tell you about it. I got an email this week from a reader of my newsletter, and she said how she works in B2B, in business to business, but it's very much a relationship based business. And she was talking about how her marketing, her whole team has embraced AI. So what does that mean? Of course, it means, faster content development, more output, more efficiency, like all of the things that AI can do for us as content creators and as marketers. But she said, that's been great. But she also talked about something that kind of is sticking in the back of her brain that she can't quite name, but doesn't feel right. And she was asking me for help and like, how does she actually articulate what she's feeling? And then number one, and then secondly, like, how does she talk about it internally to her team and to the executive team, like the higher ups? And she talked about how, yes, it's been a time saver in ways that they're using AI, but also she said it has come absolutely at a cost. And that cost is really what she couldn't articulate really well. And so I share that with you, Lynn, because I was thinking about this conversation that we're going to be having, and you had sent me the state of digital content. What's the name of the report? I
The
should have
State of Digital Content Report. Yep, you got it.
it's all there. Just the keywords were in different places. um, but yeah, you had sent me like, basically the state of digital content report. And I was looking through that and there were a couple of things that jumped out at me that I wanted to just sort of pull out for everybody here as well. When I looked at the report, and this is this is an analog slide. This is a hand-drawn slide from me. You probably can't tell that I drew it because it's just so graphically just slick. I know, but I
The
absolutely
graphic designers are sliding into your DMs right now.
Yeah. Well, believe me, I'm the one who could get a job as a designer because, like, come on, this is just a thing of beauty. This is the data that jumped out at me, though, is that 82% of content marketers are producing more. Right? We've seen our volume jump. At the same time, why is that? It's because 75% are saying it's because of AI. Like, of course, because AI is making things more efficient and because it's making things more accessible sometimes to people who maybe aren't as skilled at writing or at graphics or any of that stuff. So it's making it faster, right? We're producing more and we're producing it more quickly. But yet this is the one that jumped out at me because when you look at those two, and yet what is our biggest challenge? It's keeping up with content demands. Like that's the number one challenge according to your report. And so when you look at this, like when I first looked at it, I thought, oh, well, that's great because that means that we should just be producing more and more. We should be like putting more AI rocket fuel on top of what we're already doing. And I guess maybe that is one way of interpreting it. And I think that's probably true for some content teams. But I don't think that's actually the full story. And I think that there's another side to that equation that I think maybe tells a richer and a deeper story of what's actually going on. And that speaks a little bit to that message that I got from a reader of my newsletter earlier this week. And the message to me is that, or what's really going on underneath the numbers, is that in marketing, we always think that technology is the solution, right? We always think that we should be optimizing for efficiency, that if the technology exists, that we should use it to help us accelerate whatever it is that we're doing, not just output, but relationships, any kind of connection that we're trying to make with customers. Like if we just use technology in the right way, it can help us do that more efficiently. And this isn't just about AI, but if you look historically at the way marketing operates, and this is true from, when I first got into marketing with my first company, a couple of decades ago. And it's like, if you look at things like when content marketing came on the scene, what did we get? We got people producing blogs, but we also got content farms. We got keyword stuffing. When email marketing became popular, when the direct marketers moved from direct mail into email, we got spray and pay, right? We got cross posting amongst, when social media became a thing. On our websites, we have pop-ups. Like none of these are bad, but they all have a sort of dark side, right? Which is suggesting that all we need to do is use some of these tools to accelerate relationships to go faster. But I think the danger part is when we over rely on them. And we do this because we're always under pressure to prove a lie and to sort of take those shortcuts. But I guess what I'm saying is that right now we're at a really interesting point where AI is now throwing rocket fuel on all the things that we're doing. We are able to do things faster, and that's great. Like that efficiency, I think, is a wonderful thing in so many cases. But at the same time, I think we're at this inflection point when it's incumbent upon all of us in marketing to ask ourselves at any particular moment, is this a moment when we should go faster? Or is this a moment where maybe we need to slow ourselves down in service to something richer? For example, great content. What does it actually mean? So I think we need to be kind of selective in how we're using AI. I absolutely do not think that we should not use AI, and I don't want anybody to hear me say that. But I do think that we need to know as marketers when to optimize for efficiency, and when a slower approach ultimately will help us reach our goals.
One of the things that was in the state of digital as well is that people are realizing that more and more every day people are, and they're shifting to use the AI in tasks that can be automated, things that can take away from the admin that they're spending right now, whether that's tagging or searching, things that are really time consuming. That part can be taken, the AI approach, and allowing them to be creative to then create that authenticity and connect deeper. So I think that that's one of the things where we've seen, at least in some of the research, where like there is more content, but there's also the ability to streamline the efforts and let you be more creative without having to do the busy work, I guess you should say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all those sort of points of friction that I think we used to had to, handle ourselves is now like we can ask AI to help remove some of that friction. That to me is like the best use of AI. Like that is the part where I just love using it because it just makes your life so much easier, I mean, AI is great at doing tasks like that. It's also great at like finding patterns. I use it a lot for that reason because I cannot get out of my own head sometimes. Even if I'm just writing like a simple LinkedIn post or a newsletter, it really helps me just think through my own thoughts in a way that that makes my ideas stronger. Sometimes I can just disregard what AI suggests, not through rewriting. When I say that I use AI in that way, I mean it's like push back on my ideas, right? So sometimes I'm like, no, like I think I've got this, but sometimes it offers another point of view that I'm like, didn't think about that. So yeah.
Shifting gears a little bit, I want to talk a little bit about this idea of authenticity paradox that you've talked a lot about, where human expression, there's no substitute for that. So could you talk a little bit about the idea behind this authenticity paradox and how it's really increased a premium on human expression?
Yeah. And so basically the idea behind the authenticity paradox is this, and it's something that I talk about in my speeches. is that the more capable AI becomes at generated content, the more valuable genuinely human expression becomes. It's the thing that I was talking about a minute ago. Like, does it actually have human fingerprints on it? Does it feel like it could only come from us? It's talking about what is the thing that actually raises the bar, or that raises the premium on the content that we're producing. And I guess you can kind of think about it economically, right? It's like when something becomes abundant, like if you could buy Labubus on every street corner, right, the value would drop. And so I think AI has made competent, serviceable content essentially like free. And like sometimes that's really helpful. That's really useful. Sometimes you don't need it to have your fingerprints and your handprints all over it. But I also think that that's where that creates like a sort of new floor, right? And so our job is what becomes scarce and what becomes precious is anything above that. And I think that's really what the job is now. It used to be just about creating, but now I think it's, now we need to level it up a little bit. And so the authenticity paradox is just it's just a consequence of that. It's what happens when, if robots can sort of burp out all the content that you need by the megabyte, like in huge volumes, then, and they can right now, then I think the job and the thing that your audience most needs and desires from you and wants from you is proof that the human actually showed up in whatever it is that you're creating.
And that leads me nicely into what I really am excited to talk to you about is the courage, because a lot of people often, when they're thinking about their creativity, you say it's not necessarily a creativity issue, it's more of a courage issue. And a lot of the times, and maybe there's a component in this with just having to produce more and more content, that a lot of brands tend to stick to more safe storytelling. So, but we always have to stand out. So with this, what does courage actually look like inside a marketing organization, and how can people be a little bit more courageous when it comes to their content?
And first of all, let me just say that, it's not like that most of us in marketing, like that we signed up for this job, that we decided on this career because we wanted to not be courageous, right? It's not that way at all. And instead, I think it's, if you think about what is marketing for, it's not just about, generating leads and moving, generating MQLs that can go to SQLs. And it's not just about that. It's like part of it is, yes, of course we want to grow the business and we want to, contribute to our overall footprint and everything that we do. But at the same time, like, what is marketing actually for? It's how we connect with other people. It's like how one heart connects with another heart. And I don't think that's a soft way to think about marketing at all. Like, I literally think that's the job, because almost every brand that I do business with, it's like I have some sort of emotional connection to them, even if it's very minute or very tiny. I still think that we sort of choose somebody actively. And so here, like, that's still the job, and that requires standing out, right? Showing up in ways that not everybody else can show up. And so that's what I talk about as what I think is courageous, is showing up in ways that other people can't. And I think the way that shows up inside companies is in a few different ways. I mean, one way is showing your people, making your people front and center, because if there's one thing that AI can't replicate, it's actual human voices sharing actual human thoughts and points of view. So that's one way. Another way is specificity, and thinking about, how are we describing something? Are we being as specific as possible in articulating problems and then offering solutions to them? Vagueness moves nobody, right? It's like if you say things at a very general, high level sense, like that's not going to touch anybody. And so the more specific you can get, weirdly, the more universal you'll be understood. And a lot of that is going to come about through storytelling, right? Choosing to tell a story in a very specific way and through a very specific lens, often through a very certain, like, one person. Because the thing that AI has done, I think for all of us, it doesn't mean that you are now competing with your competitors. I think you're now competing with, like, all of human expression. Like, that's literally what AI has done. It's just given us access to everything. And that means the same is true for your competitors as well. And so, what does that mean? I mean, you can produce more and more and more. You can try to flood the zone, but I don't think ultimately, I don't think that's going to serve your goals the most. I think it's really about telling better stories, being very specific, showing your people. And maybe the best way to just sort of demonstrate what a brand who I think has done this really well is two brands, Nike and NASCAR, and for very specific reasons. It's because earlier this year, or what is this year? This is 2026. No, this is late 2025. They both launched Substack newsletters, which is like, what's so courageous about a newsletter? Like, there's nothing courageous about that. Like, we all have newsletters. But I think the way they did it is what's courageous about it. And in Nike's case, what they did is they launched a newsletter called In the Margins. It's a newsletter that tells the stories of athletes and people who are not just athletes. Like, I want to just say, like, people who are participating in sports, which sounds so general, but it's the stories of people who care about whatever sport that they're competing in. It's the backstory. It's the kind of sports writing that's hard to find anymore outside of maybe like like the kind of stories that Sports Illustrated used to have, like very, 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 very just smart, story driven, first person point of view. It's just really, really compelling stuff. And the reason why I think it's courageous is partly because of that, partly because of the storytelling aspect to it. But secondly, because they launched it so quietly as a way to sort of like, test it first, to figure out like, how is this going to work? How are we going to hone our voice over time so that it actually connects with a potential reader? Like, there's been very little press about it. There's hardly any promotion about it. It has a kind of small number of subscribers. I think last time I checked, which was a couple of weeks ago, there was like 1,300 subscribers. Like Nike, a brand like Nike has 1,300 subscribers. Like, that's insane. That has to be an error, but it's not. And so that's why I like the fact that they are experimenting and testing an idea in a very small way. And so the courageous piece of that is that I think about, why are they doing that? And yeah, we get like the market reasons for it, but there had to be somebody who walked into the boardroom at Nike and said, okay, hear me out. Like, this is what we're going to do in 2025 and Q4 and Q1 2026. We're going to test this idea of telling these personal stories of athletes. And like, that is such a courageous move, like to actually stand there and say, we're not going to play it up. We're not going to blow it up, because that's what every marketing team wants to do, right? Instead, they're sort of refining, they're testing, they're figuring out what works. And then I have no doubt that from there, they're going to blow it up, but they're starting small. And I also love the fact that it's kind of unbranded. Like, they lead with In the Margins, which is the name of the newsletter. And then down at the bottom, it has like the Nike swoosh, which we all recognize. But it's a very, very like low key connection to Nike, which I think is a strength. NASCAR did something similar, and I won't belabor that, but the fact that they did a similar thing, they launched a Substack. They, again, very, very sort of niche audience, not just people who follow NASCAR, but people who want the stories behind the scores, behind the, behind the events, and very story driven, again, very specific to a certain subset of their audience. And yeah, so I think I love hearing those stories and like trying to understand, why are they doing that and who championed that internally? Like, there had to be somebody who had the courage to suggest that.
That is really interesting, because it's almost this version of user generated content, but through their brand, because we are really into user generated content. We want to see who's using our product and what the average person has to say about it. So there's that, word of mouth vibe that still really feels authentic. And for you have a newsletter that has over 50,000 subscribers. So in a world where content and attention spans perhaps are limited, and maybe it's sort of, we're seeing this resurgence of newsletters being the vibe again. So talk to me a little bit about your newsletter and how you feel like you can connect deeper with your audience and the value that you get and that they get from this, because you have someone replying to the newsletter and then you having this whole conversation about it, to me is unique in a sense that you're interacting with your subscribers like that. But just in general, the resurgence of newsletter and having that be a way to connect with your audience. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and so I think this has been a trend for a few years now, in terms of the resurgence of email in general, email newsletters specifically. I mean, I think email is always it. To me, it's kind of like the scorpion of marketing. Like you just cannot kill it. Like it can survive in almost any environment. It's just the thing that is very much the backbone of our communications. And one of the things I've always loved about email, and this has not even about the current environment, but I think it's also true now, is that the bar is pretty high, right? That if you are not showing up consistently and giving great value, if you are not showing up in a way that's going to resonate with somebody, they can just like boop, like unsubscribe, and you are out and you cannot darken their doorstep again. And I love that. Like I wish that more of our marketing programs had to clear that bar. And so I looked at this about, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years ago at this point, and I realized that I wasn't really doing that myself. Like yes, Marketing Profs, my company, has a newsletter, but it's been years since I've actually touched that. It's like my fingerprints were not on it anymore. And the further I got from the work, the less joy I got out of it, and the less connected I felt to marketing in general. And I know that sounds like a dramatic statement, but I think if we're not actually touching things and we're not actually communicating with the audience in a very real, tangible way, no matter how far we get, in our careers, or how far up we progress, I think we lose something. It sort of hollows out the work. And I was very much feeling that. Partly I did it, to stay connected to the work, but also because even in 2019, social media was nuts, right? And it's even more crazy now, but it was so hard to sort of break through. And I thought, like, what is the opposite of social media, in the sense that you're not relying on an algorithm to carry your message to an audience? Instead, you're relying on the audience deliberately deciding to come to you. And so that to me felt like, oh, it's an email newsletter. Like that's what I thought I wanted to do, which isn't to say that I don't use social. Of course I do, and I enjoy it, but I think its role is slightly different. It's more of a discovery platform, where I wanted something that was more of a relationship builder. So that's why I launched it. And one of the things that has proven to be, like, to me, most rewarding about it is just the creating of it. Number one, because I'm a writer and I just love that ability to just connect with an audience directly. So that's the first thing. And I knew that I would, I just didn't know how deeply I really needed it as a marketer as well as a writer. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I really enjoy about it is that I invite the audience or the subscriber, one person at one time, to respond back to me. And I think that's what you sort of talked about. I called it the OWBR, the Open to Write Back Rate, which is a totally made up acronym for me, that I made up. I call it the Ober rate. And I track it. Like I want to know, what's my Ober rate? And then email platforms came out with what they call the RR, or the response rate, which is a much more grown up way of naming the metric. But I stand by my Ober. I think it's a funner way to think about it. So I want to know how many people opened it, but mostly how many people wrote back to me. And so, yeah, for all of those reasons, I did it. And the fact that I can have that sort of direct correspondence with somebody, people are always shocked when I write them back. And I think to myself, like, is it kind of a burden? Well, yeah. But at the same time, it's like, that's the marketing right there, right? Isn't it? It's connecting with one person at one time. And the fact that that is so surprising for people is surprising to me. Do you know what I'm saying? It's
right.
Very, yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like we've gotten to a point where sometimes brands felt untouchable.
Yeah.
And people felt untouchable. And then, we dropped down to more of that user-generated content that we were talking about, where it became more about the day-to-day person. And I think we're hopefully edging towards some sort of middle ground there, where people know that there's a person behind both the one writing the email and the one reading the email. And I think that sort of leads to one of the last things we'll talk about, but just moving from more attention grabbing to genuine connection in a world where everyone wants to grab attention, and brands have more ways to reach people than ever before. But it's more surface level. So how do we sort of foster that relationship? And maybe that newsletter is part of it, but that shift from attention to connection.
It is coming around in the sense of, the feeling that there is a person behind a brand who is writing a newsletter. But I would actually argue that the game has really changed with email, and it's because of AI. Like for years, email marketing has been obsessed with deliverability. Like they think that the goal is, yes, you want to be engaging and readable, but deliverability has been a huge thing, right? Getting into the inbox, landing in there has been, kind of step one, making sure you can do that. But now with AI increasingly, managing and filtering and summarizing inboxes for people, like, what does that mean? Getting in isn't enough anymore. It's not just about deliverability. Now it's about being chosen. And so literally you have to have the kind of email program where a recipient, like say you write to me and I have to be like, oh my God, it's from Lynn. Like I'll set that aside for later because I wanna read it. Like it's important to me to hear what Lynn has to say. And that to me is the game. Like that is, if an AI assistant is deciding what's worth paying attention to, then I think you have to interrupt that process, right? It's no longer about deliverability. It's a relationship issue, right? So do you have a relationship with the person you are marketing to? I think the email strategy that works now is long term anyway, is being someone that your reader would genuinely miss if you don't show up. If you don't show up, will they miss you? If I miss an email newsletter, I get letters. Like people say, are you okay? Did you get hit by a bus? Like what's going on? And so I think that's the bar right now. Again, it's a high bar, but I think it's a great one for us to be called to.
That's really important. I think that that's a good way to sort of wrap. I have a couple things, but one thing I just want to ask you is that, so if someone is listening to you today and they're saying, okay, how can I be braver and create more meaningful content? And they're going back and having a marketing meeting next week. What's some advice that you would give them?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to first of all, recognize the value that you have as a writer, a creator, a marketer. I think as marketers, as professionals right now, we're getting a lot tossed on us. There's a lot more things that are suddenly on our plates that didn't used to be. It's kind of like how the backup camera on your car is now allowing you to be able to parallel park more easily, right? More seamlessly. And I think there's all these sort of like shadow jobs that are now suddenly on us. Like if you go to the checkout at Stop and Shop, for example, now you're like self-checkout is now that's your job now, right? It used to be that there was somebody there. And so there's all these little ways that I think that technology is coming in to make our lives easier in the case of the backup cam, but also to sort of put a little bit of extra layer on things, like in the case of self-service checkout. And like sometimes that's great. Sometimes you don't want to talk to somebody, but I think increasingly in marketing, we're seeing those moments where suddenly we have to, we're in charge of all of these things. We have all of these things that we're working on. I think, what happens there? Like, what do you do in that situation? Like, if you want to be braver at your job, I think the first thing is just to really embrace your power and to think very strategically about where can I use AI to help ease my burdens and to help accelerate things? And then secondly, though, what do I choose to not use it for? Like, how do I protect my judgment? Because that to me is the part that's scariest. It's the part that I worry we are forgetting about in marketing. And I just I don't know, I can't express this enough, but I just don't want people to lose that. It's so important.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to wrap with a couple rapid fire questions and then we'll really be done. So one or two word or one sentence answer. What's one habit great content creators should build?
Oh my goodness. Some sort of analog practice. I get a lot out of my practice every day of writing in I was looking for a pencil right here. This is a better one. Of writing in my journal every morning, 10 minutes, longhand with a pencil. analog just really helps before the algorithm starts biting in, before a machine starts butting in and even auto completing your sentences. And so I think just keeping your hand connected to your heart, connected to your brain, all those things together, I think can make you a stronger communicator, and just a more engaged and in touch person.
Love that. I will definitely take that because I don't write enough. What's one signal that the content is actually connecting with your audience?
Mm, I think we tend to look at things like how many people downloaded or how many people commented or something like that. But to me, the what I like to look at is what I call echoes. Like, in what ways is it resonating? So I look for the language that people use more than the straight metrics. And I think if you put those two together, it's really helpful. So, for example, look in customer service inquiries or customer service conversations, look in sales notes, look to see what people say to you when they respond to your email. Look for words that they use when they comment on something that you've written on social media. Look for words like surprising or understanding or I get it now. Like, look for things like that. And I think those sort of softer metrics, when you combine them with the harder metrics, really give you a much fuller picture.
Okay, and before you say, is it over now? I'm going to ask you one thing we can learn from Taylor Swift.
Oh my gosh, one thing we can, oh my God, we should have started with this. We could have talked for half an hour about what we can learn from Taylor. Um, yeah, her storytelling, the way that the way that she uses her music to tell a story, and to help, kind of where we started this conversation, help you see your own life experiences in her life experiences. That's why her music is so powerful, because yeah, she's writing about her life and her loves and her losses and what she's gained, but you can't help but relate to her experience if you are a careful listener. And once you do that, like, you can't unhear it. And that to me is the game, not only for Taylor Swift, but for all of us in marketing.
Very nice. I think that that is the perfect way to wrap. Thank you so, so much for all your insights and your genuine perspective on where we're at today and what we're going to be doing in the future that's really going to make the difference. I really appreciated the conversation and cannot thank you enough. And do you have any final thoughts or anything you want to add before we wrap?
Oh my gosh, no, I would say just, thank you, Canto, for having me. If you haven't checked out the State of Digital Content Marketing Report, you should absolutely check it out. Lots of great stuff in there. And yeah, again, just like, I appreciate you too. Thank you so much for having me.